Did you know that Death Valley contains a dry lake bed where rocks weighing 700 pounds move on their own across flat ground, leaving trails hundreds of feet long, and nobody witnessed it happen for over a century? That a hidden lake 600 feet deep once filled the lowest point in North America, evaporated completely, and has returned twice in the past 20 years. And that beneath the hottest surface ever recorded on this planet, a volcanic system is still active, with a crater scientists now believe is far younger than they originally thought, and the conditions for another eruption still exist today. I understand this reads like fiction. All of these facts are accurate. Death Valley is not just a stretch of hot sand and a sign about sea level. It is moving rocks, vanishing lakes, ancient volcanoes, and a desert that blooms. Today, 35 insane facts about Death Valley that sound completely made up, but are 100% real. 35. The lowest point in North America is not the bottom. Badwater Basin occupies nearly 200 square miles of salt flat, and what you're walking on when you cross that white surface is sodium chloride, calcite, gypsum, and borax, compressed into layers left behind by an ancient inland lake. For most of the Pleistocene era, a lake called Lake Manly filled this basin to a depth of roughly 600 feet. That entire chain of water is now desert. What remains is the mineral crust of a lake that has been gone for approximately 10,000 years, and you can walk across it in August. 34. The vertical drop that is twice the depth of the Grand Canyon. Telescope Peak stands at the western edge of Death Valley, at 11,049 feet above sea level. Badwater Basin sits 282 feet below it. The vertical distance between those 2 points, measured within the same national park, is approximately 11,331 feet. To put that in scale, the Grand Canyon is about 6,093 feet deep at its deepest point. The drop from Telescope Peak to Badwater Basin is roughly twice that. The entire distance is contained within a single park boundary. It is the greatest local vertical relief of any location in the contiguous United States, and most people who visit Death Valley never look up far enough to register that the relief is even there. 33. The rocks that moved for over a century without anyone watching. On the floor of Racetrack Playa, a remote dry lake bed about 27 miles from the nearest paved road, rocks have been leaving long trails across flat mud for as long as anyone has observed the place. Some of those rocks weigh 700 pounds. The trails extend as far as 1,500 feet. No one had ever seen them actually move. What they found was a specific convergence of winter rain, overnight freezing, and morning thaw that created a thin sheet of ice. A light wind pushed that ice sheet. The ice pushed the rocks. The rocks left trails in soft mud beneath. In the winter of 2013 and 2014, researchers observed 60 rocks move 5 separate times. Some traveled 735 feet over 3 months. The mystery was 100 years old. The solution required ice, a few millimeters thick. 32. The ancient volcanic explosion that might not be finished. 600 feet deep and half a mile across, Ubehibe crater sits in the northern section of Death Valley, looking like something that belongs on a different planet. It formed when magma rising from deep underground hit pockets of groundwater. The resulting steam explosion was not a lava flow. It was a detonation. Rock and ash blasted outward and settled across an area stretching 15 miles from the crater. More recent analysis put the formation date at roughly 2,100 years ago, which in geological terms is not old at all. Here is the part that matters. Ubehibe is the largest of 13 craters in the immediate area. The conditions that created it, rising magma meeting groundwater, have not been eliminated. Scientists studying the crate are determined that the magma system beneath it remains active, and that groundwater is still present. The explosion happened inside the window of recorded human civilization. A follow-up is not impossible. Most visitors stand on the rim and look in without knowing that part. 31. The heat record that has stood for 111 years. On July 10, 1913, a weather station at Greenland Ranch in Death Valley recorded an air temperature of 134 degrees Fahrenheit. It is the highest atmospheric temperature ever formally recorded on the surface of the Earth. Death Valley is a long, narrow basin with steep mountain walls on every side. The clear, dry air and nearly absent plant cover allow sunlight to heat the ground directly, and intensely. Summer overnight lows at Badwater Basin regularly sit between 82 and 98 degrees. The record set in 1913 has not been broken in over a century, despite subsequent summers including some of the hottest years in recorded global history. 30. The evaporation rate that makes rain almost irrelevant. Death Valley receives an average of 1.9 inches of rainfall per year. The annual evaporation potential of that same basin is 150 inches. That is the greatest evaporation potential anywhere in the United States. To put that in practical terms, a 12-foot deep lake sitting in Death Valley would dry up completely within a single year. The lakes that occasionally form after rare storm events, including the return of Lake Manly in 2005, are measured in inches of depth, not feet. Historically, this evaporation dynamic is what transformed Lake Manly from a 600-foot deep inland sea into the 200 square miles of salt crust that visitors photograph today. The water did not drain away, it evaporated. For thousands of years. 29. The desert that blooms when nobody expects it. Death Valley's official classification is a hyper-arid desert. Average rainfall is under 2 inches. Buried in that ground are seeds that have been waiting, in some cases, for years. Dormant desert annual wildflowers have evolved to require a rainfall threshold before they will germinate. A single storm of at least half an inch breaks the protective coating on the seed. The seeds need one significant event. When they get it, they bloom in numbers so large the desert floor changes color. Between November 2025 and January 2026, Death Valley received more than 2.5 inches of rain, exceeding its annual average. By mid-February 2026, lower elevations were already flowering. The valley does not warn anyone when one is coming. 28. The underground geology is older than most continents. The oldest rocks exposed anywhere in Death Valley National Park have been dated to at least 1,700 million years old. They were metamorphosed by heat and pressure, intruded by granite approximately 1,400 million years ago, then uplifted and eroded for the next 500 million years. Geologically, what you are looking at when you stand in Death Valley is not one story. It is dozens of stories layered on top of each other, spanning more time than most people can hold in their heads at once. 27. The valley floor is sinking right now. Death Valley exists as part of the Basin and Range Province, a region of the western United States where the Earth's crust is actively stretching and thinning. As the crust extends, land blocks sink and others rise. The valley itself sits in a structural depression that is still subsiding. The measured rate of sinking at Death Valley is approximately 1 inch per year. That is an ongoing tectonic process. The mountains on the valley's edges, the Panamint Range to the west and the Amargosa Range to the east, are simultaneously rising. The relief between the valley floor and the surrounding peaks is not a fixed geological feature. It is increasing. Death Valley is not a finished landscape. It is an active one. 26. The lake that keeps coming back. Lake Manly filled Death Valley's basin to a depth of 600 feet during wetter periods of the Pleistocene. That lake dried up roughly 10,000 years ago. It has returned multiple times in smaller form since then. In February 2005, sufficient rainfall refilled the basin with a wide, shallow lake. That lake evaporated by 2007. Then in 2023, Hurricane Hillary brought extraordinary rainfall to the region. The lake reformed again, this time shallow enough to wade through in sections, but wide enough to be photographed from satellites. The salt flat that tourists photograph year-round became a temporary body of water for the second time in 20 years. The basin floods when the rainfall is extraordinary and evaporates when it is not. 25. The rain shadow that creates the dryness is built into the geography. The Panamint Mountains rise directly to the west of Death Valley's floor. Before moisture-laden air from the Pacific Ocean can reach the valley, it must climb over the Sierra Nevada, then again over the Panamint Range. By the time that air descends on the eastern side, it has released nearly all of its moisture as rain and snow on the western slopes. What reaches the valley floor is dry, compressed, and hot from the descent. This is the rain shadow effect, and Death Valley sits in one of the most extreme versions of it anywhere on Earth. That geographic arrangement is not going to change. The Panamint Mountains are rising. The rain shadow is, if anything, becoming more pronounced as the surrounding terrain grows taller. 24. The Timbisha Shoshone have lived here continuously for at least 1,000 years. Most visitors to Death Valley pass through the village of Furnace Creek without knowing that next to it sits one of the only permanently inhabited Native American settlements inside a national park in the United States. The Timbisha Shoshone people have lived in the Death Valley region for at least 1,000 years, moving seasonally between lower and higher elevations to follow food sources across the landscape. Historically, the creation of Death Valley National Monument in 1933 complicated that existence considerably. It was not until the year 2000, when President Clinton signed the Timbisha Shoshone Homeland Act, that the tribe received approximately 7,500 acres of land within the park boundaries. The people who understood this place longest were officially recognized within at last 23. The borax industry that shaped the valley's modern history. Borax, a mineral compound used in cleaning products, glass production, and industrial manufacturing, was discovered in commercial quantities in Death Valley in 1881. The deposits at Harmony Borax Works near Furnace Creek were mined extensively from 1883 through 1907. The challenge was not extraction, it was transport. The nearest railroad was more than 160 miles away. The solution was a wagon system, pulled by teams of 20 mules, carrying loads that sometimes exceeded 36 tons per trip across desert terrain. Those teams, known as the 20-mule teams, became one of the most recognizable images in American commercial history. The brand that used the image, 20-Mule Team Borax, ran advertisements, featuring it for decades. 22. The sand dunes that most people photograph are not the largest in the park. The Mesquite Flat sand dunes near Stovepipe Wells are among the most photographed features in Death Valley. They are approximately 100 feet tall at their highest point. They are not the largest dunes in the park. The Eureka Dunes, located in the remote northern section of the park near the Nevada border, rise to approximately 680 feet. That makes them among the tallest sand dunes in the United States. To hear it, you have to be at a dune that most Death Valley visitors never reach, in a section of park, accessible only by unpaved road. 21. The pupfish that survived the Ice Age in a hole in the ground. Devil's Hole is a water-filled cavern in the Amargosa Desert just outside Death Valley's eastern boundary. It drops more than 500 feet straight down into the earth and connects to a groundwater system whose depth has never been fully measured. Near the surface of the water, on a single rock shelf, roughly the size of a parking space, lives an entire species. The Devil's Hole pupfish, Cyprinodon diabolus, is one of the rarest fish on Earth. Its entire wild population lives in one location. At its lowest recorded count in 2013, there were 35 individual fish remaining. The species has occupied this cavern since the end of the last ice age, isolated from all other water sources as the climate dried. There is no other place on the planet where it exists in the wild. 20. The geology beneath the valley contains evidence of ancient seas, in layers visible from the road. The walls of Death Valley expose a cross-section of geological time that geologists use as a reference record for the region's entire history. Limestone layers visible in the Black Mountains contain marine fossils from ancient shallow seas that covered this region during the Paleozoic era. Volcanic ash layers mark the major eruption events. Alluvial fan deposits record periodic wet periods when streams ran out of the mountains and onto the valley floor. The oldest exposed rocks, the basement metamorphics, are visible in road cuts and canyon walls throughout the park. What they found in terms of pure geological complexity was something closer to a natural archive than a mining claim. 19. The temperature at the ground surface has reached 201 degrees. Air temperature and ground surface temperature are different measurements. Death Valley holds the world record for air temperature. It also holds records for ground surface temperature. The surface of the dark, bare soil in Death Valley has been measured at 201 degrees Fahrenheit during peak summer conditions. That surface temperature is hot enough to cook food. It is hot enough to cause severe burns from brief contact. The ground itself, on a summer afternoon, is generating and absorbing heat at a rate that creates a zone near the soil surface where air temperature measurements do not fully capture what is actually happening. Kangaroo rats stay underground until dark. Most reptiles are active only in the early morning and evening. 18. The national park boundary contains more biological diversity than most people associate with extreme desert. Death Valley National Park covers approximately 3.4 million acres, making it the largest national park in the contiguous United States. Within that boundary, elevation ranges from 282 feet below sea level to 11,049 feet above it. That vertical span produces correspondingly diverse habitats. The salt flats at Badwater Basin support a community of salt-adapted organisms. The Mesquite Flat supports a different plant community entirely. Pinyon pine and juniper woodlands cover higher elevations on the surrounding ranges. Alpine vegetation appears near the summit of Telescope Peak. The park contains more than 1,000 plant species, more than 400 bird species recorded over time, 51 national mammal species, and 36 reptile species. The biology of the place does not support that characterization. It is extreme life, adapted life, minimally resourced life, but it is not an absence. 17. The 49ers who named the valley were mostly wrong about what they experienced. In the winter of 1849 and 1850, a group of gold seekers from the Midwest attempted to use Death Valley as a shortcut to California's gold fields. They became lost in the basin for weeks. When they finally found a route out, one member of the party reportedly looked back at the valley and said, "Goodbye, Death Valley." The name stuck. The incident was genuinely dangerous, and the party suffered severely from thirst, heat, and difficult terrain. But of the roughly 100 people who entered the valley during that episode, only one person died. The name Death Valley emerged from an experience in which the death toll was a single individual out of 100. The valley earned its name from a group of frightened, exhausted people who were mostly wrong about how many of them it had actually killed.